Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sero, the Happiness Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We're champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Lu Ngo, coming to your ears from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's learn together. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Sero Boost. We're here at another episode this week to talk about the happiness science. And today we're going to talk about a topic that is probably really relatable to everyone. We're going to talk about boosting mood, the power of positive online interactions. I'm sure we could all do with more positive online interactions nowadays, especially because we're glued to our screens most of the time, whether it be for work, school, life, anything in between that. So today we have a very special guest in our virtual studio and who's in a very different time zone from us. We're kind of in the future and he's kind of in the past right now. We have Dr. Mike Ribble with us today, and he is the author of the books Digital Citizenship in Schools, now in his third edition, and Raising a Digital Child. He has worked within the education field his entire career. In 2019, his latest book on digital citizenship for leaders, called Digital Citizenship Handbook for Educational Leaders, was released. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mike. I know we've had a lot of fun just, getting to frame you right and make sure we can hear you correctly. It's been a fun morning for us here. I hope you've had a good day so far, and thanks for joining our show.
I'm so glad to have this opportunity to talk to you, and hopefully we'll get some different ideas and some new thoughts about how to be a little more happy online.
Yeah, absolutely. I could use some tips for sure, because I have found that it's like an interesting relationship I have with my phone, and I would love to hear some insights from you. Before we start, I know it's a different time zone, and for our audience who doesn't know where you're based, can you share a bit more about your location, where you're based?
Certainly. I'm actually here in the United States, and really right in the middle of the United States. I'm based out of Kansas. I spent most of my career here in this region, and I've had few opportunities to travel to different parts of the world, and actually was down in Brisbane back in about 2010, and went there, and actually was over in Perth as well, so that we were able to see the country a little bit more.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. I think it's so interesting. A lot of our guests recently have said, who are outside of Australia, they're like, oh yeah, I've been to Brisbane. And I'm like, what happened to Melbourne? You've never been to Melbourne, but every single one of you has been to Brisbane for some reason. Maybe because it's warmer there. I have to say it's really cold here right now, so that's probably why. So that is where you are based. How about your career? Because today we're talking about this, this topic, which is positive online interaction. And I know that your whole career has been in education. I'm sure you got to be so passionate about this topic to have written, quite a few books on similar topics. And there's got to be a reason why, especially because, the internet has come into our lives not that long ago, but it's kind of changed dramatically over the years. So I'm sure with your depth of knowledge and your professional background, there's got to be a reason why. So can you share a bit more about your professional career, and also how you got to where you are right now doing what you're doing, and why you wrote all these books? They're so interesting.
Sure. I started off as a science teacher at the college level, and was very passionate about teaching, about working with students. Began working on my administrative degrees, so did that at that level as well. Really got into the technology piece. I know it's hard to tell, but I've been around just a little bit. So I I got to see the early days of the internet. That was where I began my career. So got very, very interested in the technology and the changes that were coming with it, and actually stayed in education, but worked on the other side. I was actually did technology background work, technology support at a community college, which was a great experience here in the United States. Learned a lot from a lot of great people. I continued my education, went to university, and worked on my doctorate under a gentleman by the name of Jerry Bailey. And Dr. Bailey really put me on this path. And I know, like I said, it's really surprising, but it's been over 20 years now that I've been writing on this topic and speaking to various people, both here in the United States, but internationally as well, which has just been a great pleasure for me because, even though, we're different countries, different peoples, when it comes to technology, it's very interesting how we have a lot of the same or similar issues, not just here, but everywhere across the globe.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's such a universal topic nowadays because we stay connected to one another thanks to the internet. So obviously, it's not all bad. I know a lot of people are kind of, bashing screen time and, social media. And to me, I think there's more to the conversation, and we'll explore a lot of the different angles today. So thank you for sharing about your professional journey. I'm sure we'll pick up at least a few interesting or new ideas today. Before we go into that, let's talk about you. We have a section at the beginning where we called Have You Met Mike? Where we're going to get to know you a bit better by getting some of your recommendations. I always say this is my favorite part, actually, because it's good to get to know the guest, and at the same time I get a few new things to add to my list of things to read or watch, or just kind of get inspiration from. First question is my favorite one. I am an avid reader, so I'm wondering, which book would you recommend?
Uh, there's so many that are, some great books that are out there, and I will tell you that I've been picking up books on AI here lately. Artificial intelligence has become kind of a passion. The last one that I was reading was Scary Smart by Goddard, and a lot of things to think about where AI is. But very much an avid science fiction reader. I would have to say probably one of my all-time favorites has got to be Frank Herbert's Dune. I know that's popular again. They're re-releasing that as a movie, but I can't tell you how many times I've reread that book. It's a wonderful science fiction book, and I've really enjoyed it over the years.
Yeah. Well, the first book you recommended is very on brand with your professional journey. The second one is very interesting because just this morning, before we jumped into this recording, my colleague and I were talking about it, actually.
Wonderful.
Yeah, we were talking about, we started out talking about movies, what to see in IMAX. Dune's coming out, the second part. And he has been reading Dune himself, so he has been telling me the plot of Dune. And now you're talking about the book. I think the universe is trying to tell me to read the books. So today, that's one thing that I've picked up. Thank you for that. Wonderful. Okay. Second question. What is a movie you would recommend?
Again, I'm kind of go back quite a bit as far as movies. All the classics. The old cowboy movies. They're so popular here in the United States. But I have to say, I was actually fortunate enough to be around when the original Star Wars was released in 1977, and
Yeah.
so. Having seen that, it changed my whole mentality about science fiction, about storytelling, just the whole thing. Just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's so lucky of you to have, gone through that time and like experience it when it came out. Because I got into Star Wars, I think a couple of years ago, and I was just blown away. Even though the first movies were released years ago, they were still timeless. They're still timeless. Anytime I watch them, I'm like, yes, I'm in the universe of Star Wars. I'm with the Force.
Exactly.
It's amazing. So yeah, great recommendation. Okay, so you're our podcast guest today, but I wonder which podcast you would recommend.
I would say just for overall knowledge, I love NPR's Fresh Air. I'll tell you, they have some great topics. I've been trying to get out and do some walking. I listen to the NPR podcast all the time. They have some, historical, but also very timely. I would say as far as more in, what could consider my wheelhouse, I guess, is called Your Undivided Attention. That probably for some of your listeners may not be, maybe a little heavy. It's a little heavier podcast, but a lot of really good information. They're very, very well researched, a lot of knowledge. But if you want to dive in and you want to hear more about AI, that's probably one that you ought to at least listen to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Great recommendations. Next question. Who is your role model? This could be a famous person or just your personal role model.
Well, I just as far as personal, I mentioned his name, Dr. Gerald Bailey, definitely was a thought leader in education that probably no one had heard of or probably heard much of. He co-authored many educational textbooks and others, but he was just able to see what the next big topic was going to be, and he was actually the one that I first heard the term digital citizenship. He actually was talking about that in 2002 in a classroom setting. I was a graduate assistant for him, and he covered that in a class, and I could still remember it today. I could tell you exactly where I was, and it's still amazing to me today. As far as famous person, thought a little bit on this. I would say Thomas Aquinas, just because as a thought piece, being able to use reason to actually work through problems, very much someone that was willing and able to work through a lot of topics. Some religious, but others were societal and in nature. So that he would be a role model.
Yeah, some new names for me to learn today. And thank you for sharing that. It was super inspirational. Final question in this part. What is a course you completed that has really left a strong impact on you?
There's been so many different pieces that have been out there, and I will tell you that part of my work that I do is I do work in a school collective district here in Kansas, and the last 2 years have been very, very heavy in cybersecurity. So I've been spending quite a bit of time in that field. How best to secure our networks and make sure that our people are secure, but also helping them to understand how they're a part of that security piece. So there's some of them that that are different courses that I've taken from different organizations, but probably one of them there was a university course here at our local university that covered quite a bit of the current topics of digital or the cybersecurity and what it's doing today, but also what it looks like in the future.
That's super cool. And again, very on brand with your professional career and journey. So thank you for sharing that. It's just affirmed that you're the great guest to talk about this topic with us today. And now let's talk about the topic. We've been holding our breath, at least for me. I've been itching to ask you questions about this. But the show is about happiness. So let's start with your definition of happiness, because it'll be like how we are going to set the scene for any movie, right? So this is like how we're going to set the scene for this conversation. Each person has a very different definition of happiness. So, Mike, I wonder what your definition is.
That was a great question when I saw that. And actually, probably the one that I spent the most time really thinking through was, what is happiness? How do we define it? And another person, that actually I mentioned him, wrote a book on about finding happiness, and so I thought through, what do I feel like, happiness, and really to me there's two levels to happiness. There's those short-term, happy, enjoyment, having, your first child, having those immediate reactions to different situations. And, that was, really something that, I was trying to focus on is, what is that versus what I would consider, more long-term happiness. And to me, it's really about working towards a goal. It's working towards what we want to be and what we want to do. And I think that, some people have lost some of that direction, that, they're just not sure what they want to do and where they want to be. So, to be happy, without a direction, then we try to fill that in with, small incremental pieces. And, we're going to hit upon that, more when we talk about, podcasts and websites and different things. But it's really about, how do I see myself and my relationship to others within the community that I'm in? Because, being a digital citizen is really about, how am I a part of this society? How am I part of all of this? And how do I make, provide that, that back to others? And that to me is my definition of happiness is, how can I provide that, not just for myself, but how can I provide help and support and working and living and doing all those things in an online space that everybody is, has that positive aspect to it.
Yeah, I really like that because it provides a different angle on this show. We talk a lot about things like materials, like relationships. But a big part of our lives that we probably haven't covered as much is definitely the online interactions. And, I think it's fair to say that, to a certain extent, some of our happiness can come from these online sources if we know where to look and how to balance it out, right? Because we spend so much of our time on these screens, and it's just making the most of them. I feel it's not like we are driven by them. We also, we are in charge. So today we're going to learn how to be in charge in the right way, I guess. And we'll figure all of that out with the interview and as it unfolds. But I wonder what you think about the misconceptions out there, because on the one hand, you have your definition of happiness. On the other hand, I'm sure you have your own observation when it comes to, people defining their own happiness in lives. And a lot of the times, we see misconceptions everywhere. Like we see this in people we interact with, or we see this through the online sphere as well. When we interact with people or see people who just sort of embrace their lives and share their lives in different lenses. And we can see, oh yeah, like why would that person think that? This is not happiness, for example. So with your work, with your research, and also with your life experience, what do you think to be some of the biggest misconceptions out there about happiness?
Well, I think that, a lot of people are looking at, these smaller, the likes, getting those, affirmations as that's the end of happiness. And it can make us happy. I mean, we'll talk more about that later, but it's really about, how do we, interact with each other. And you mentioned about relationships, and this is an opportunity for us to interconnect, and on a much larger basis than we've ever done before. When and just looking at where we were and where we are today, I remember having a conversation with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Jason Oler, and he happened to be up in Alaska. And for those that don't know Alaska, it's a fairly large state within the United States, and he was at a university, at the University of Alaska, and they actually interacted with people that were far, far in the northern part. I mean, almost towards the Arctic Circle, and so they were, sending documentation and getting it back. And he was talking about, the first time that they actually were able to use the internet as a communication model, and how that changed, their whole relationship with those people, because it used to take weeks or months before they would get information back and forth. And now it was in the matter of minutes to hours that it had changed. So I think, the misconception is that, people can't find their happiness. They can't find, where they are, but it's a process. It's a building process of understanding and being able to see those incremental steps, be able to build upon those one after another.
Yeah, that's so true. I think it's super on brand with today's topic. And with that, let's talk about it. I think it's so interesting earlier in the conversation when you said digital citizenship. I think this is probably my second time hearing this term. And I find the term to be something that it's not like, oh my God, like I've never heard about this before, and it's like something completely new. I feel like it's a concept that should be embraced by everyone, but it's also not mentioned as much. So can you briefly explain this concept to our audience, and especially its importance in today's connected world? Because as I said earlier, we're sort of connecting with pretty much everyone through our screens. So, what is this concept of digital citizenship?
Yeah, and as I said, we're over 20 years that it's been out there, and it is surprising that we don't hear about it as much, in the mainstream. Every twice in a while, it'll come up. It'll be something that will be discussed, but mainly it's in the educational field that really we talk about this idea of digital citizenship. And my definition is this appropriate and responsible use of technology, and where we are and where we are, our place in using technology. And so that's why I felt like, this discussion about, having these positive interactions online is really about digital citizenship. And that's, what we're hoping to do is to get to that place where people are having positive interactions online, and it's helping them through that process. And so when I talked to Dr. Bailey, when I was working on this as a early grad student, was really about, breaking it down into its parts. And so what I originally came up with, which became what I called the 9 elements of digital citizenship, was really talking about the different aspects of it. So access and rights and responsibilities, and safety, and communication and collaboration, and health and welfare. And, it was all aspects that if you looked at society and held a mirror up to it, it was the same look as what are we doing in the society and how do we act and interact? And that's where I kind of started that process. Then it was, how do we take that and then be able to apply it? And this latest book that you mentioned, I did as a co-author with another gentleman by the name of Dr. Marty Park. And Marty and I really were focused on how do we build this so that educational institutions can really take these ideas and be able to implement them. And we broke them down into what we identified as 3 layers of each of these elements, which was safe, savvy, and social. So our model is just called the S3 model, which is for those 3 topics. And each one of them, we walk through each area of safety, becoming savvy or smart about using the technology. And then really, kind of where we're headed today is talking about the social aspect. So we actually have, levels that we're identifying that help children, students, teachers, and parents to be able to better understand each of these different aspects and where do they fit within that society. And that's really what this is. And, we're definitely finding that, we can and have, lived online. And, we don't like to talk about it too much, but, that issue that happened back in 2020 and 2021 that kept all of us at home and kept us separated, we became more digital citizens. We were in that online space almost all the time. And that was really, what we became. And there was kind of I wouldn't say outcry, but I mean, there was definitely people that were asking, how can we do this better? I mean, how can we be better about, how we use the technology? And so I had done several podcasts during that time and really talked about, what it means to be a digital citizen and where that is. And like I said, I think there was a lot of talk around the topic. But then, we came out of COVID and, like I said, we started into this whole cybersecurity, which is an aspect as well of digital citizenship. And we talk about privacy, we talk about safety and security and all of those aspects. But, that became a big one. And then the last, 6 months is all about artificial intelligence and AI and where that fits, which is another aspect of it. It's, all part and parcel of how do we live in this digital space. And I think, we're still in a generation where, some have grown up with it. And we definitely have children now that only have known living in this digital world. And we still are struggling with how do we help them? How do we share the ideas that can make them better digital citizens as far as, understanding what can I share? What should be, out there, that's has my information, but also to build and learn what tools there are. And, we used a lot of those online tools, like I said, all through COVID, Zoom and Teams and all, multiple different platforms, Google's platform, everybody had their own, different social media, online presence. So it's just amazing that, we've kind of come through that. And now it feels like we've kind of gone back to pre-2020 and we're back to, we're back in, back face to face. Everything's, the the same, but is it? I mean, I think things changed, and
Yeah.
I think we've changed as a
Definitely.
society. I think we've changed as different communities, but definitely even as an international kind of collective. It's changed us. We're different.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think even if, we didn't used to use our devices and be on the internet as much pre-COVID, we were already digital citizens, because I think the second that you're online, you are one. It's just a matter of navigating the space yourself, right? And it's such an interesting space because you can do whatever you want. You can go wherever you please, and there's no rule, there's no guidebook. And obviously, now a lot of new issues have emerged where people are navigating through the different sort of like the dark corners, or like having scams and going through all these issues. Identities have been stolen. It's more prevalent now than ever, and lots of hacking happening. I was actually talking to my colleague about it. Like some of my accounts got some sort of activities, and it showed that people were trying to hack them. And I was kind of like, at least it was good in terms of security that we have, for example, two-factor authentication. So it's less sort of threatening for us to lose something, lose our accounts in an instance. But it's still an interesting space to navigate, because when you really think about it, you kind of store all of your information online, here and there and everywhere. And I think it's just so different now compared to the past, because I do remember a time when there was no internet. I remember that vividly, and I actually enjoy that time a lot. And I talk about this a few times on the show. Like, I enjoyed just calling friends instead of texting them or participating in all these activities on social media. At the same time, social media is kind of fun to kind of, to be able to capture these moments and share things with your friends and get inspiration, get ideas, and connect to the world out there. And I think that's kind of like the interesting factor about it, because there's so much to navigate. And sure, now we're sort of back to normal, and I don't even know what normal means anymore. We are kind of back to normal, and we don't interact on the internet as much, but we still do. Like I find that for my friends and I, like sometimes I find it interesting because in the old days you used to call, and then there was cell phones, you started texting, and then there was social media, so you started sharing things with each other online. Sometimes these can be like educational resources or content. Sometimes it's kind of like here's a funny meme to brighten your day. Like it's just something so silly and simple. And previously, when you call someone, they didn't pick up, you try and call again later, or they'll call you back. Now there's ghosting, thanks to the wonders of the internet. So it's kind of like I think it's such a space to navigate where it can affect our mental health a lot, and especially we're talking about happiness, right? A lot of these things affect our levels of well-being and happiness. When you have a healthy friendship, it's all great. But when you kind of have these friendships where it's like, people message you only to ghost you later, or, send you things that you wouldn't necessarily enjoy, it's kind of like you have to filter that yourself, right? And we're talking about positive online interaction. So I would say if we focus on the positive part, definitely we'll see, an impact on our happiness and well-being. So to focus on that particular bit, based on your experience and your research, what would be, how do positive online interactions contribute to our happiness?
Yeah, I just believe that we're definitely in a digital society, and the digital aspects. You mentioned about the pre-internet days, and I can remember those early days, and even in social media where we tried to collect friends online. Very much like we would collect. Here in the United States, we would collect baseball cards or Pokemon cards or whatever. It was how many did you have? I mean, how many, and then, there was what I called the culling. People started to decide, oh, I'm going to start clearing house of, who's my friends. I mean, who's really my friends, and who maybe is not. So, it was definitely, a changing time. So, being able to find those spaces that mean more to us, and being able to find those connections. And I think that, that's, the largest aspect of happiness is really, how do I find the people that mean something, and can provide that support for me. And I think that's, we're starting to see this in many different subgroups where, they felt disenfranchised for, such a long time. And now they're able to find people of like-mindedness. And so they don't feel as alone anymore. And I think that that's an important aspect of happiness is, that we're not so separated, that we do have these opportunities and connections with each other. And that's, something that, having a good core of people, but also, balance is a big piece of that as well. How do we use the tools, but also utilize them to get out, connect, and be a part of the in real life, or IRL, or however you want to identify it, and use those tools to be able to pull us into those opportunities. And you hear about the bad things that happen, but a lot of people have met their mates online, and people have been able to find each other over vast distances of time and space, that we would have never had that opportunity before. And that's one thing that I find so intriguing is now we can connect with so many people on a global level that 30, 40 years ago we wouldn't have even contemplated. We knew a small group of people, but now because of my website, because of the books that I've written, people have communicated with me. And the last 30 days I've talked to people in Morocco, in Dubai, in Saudi Arabia, in Southeast Asia. There's just so many pieces that it pulls together, and those are things that help me as a digital citizen to feel connected and feel like I'm part of that larger group.
Yeah, that's so true. I think the sense of community we have now, it's quite different, because previously all you could do was to, sort of look around you and perhaps network in person. Lots of people have friends that go way back, like from when they were kids, and then from school. But now we expand our network so much more, so much beyond that. We get to go to meetups, because we find these people who are like-minded and create these meetups, and that online interaction leads to in-person interaction, and it's quite positive. Because in the past it was probably much harder to reach people who are so far away from you, or to have these kind of communities and find really like-minded people. And like you said, a lot of people find their mates on the internet. That is so true, and that contributes to our happiness overall. So not everything is all bad. And again, I really believe in the power of navigating the space, smartly, because it's about how we use it. Everyone gets the same access to the internet, and some people make the most of it. And they are the happiest people because they know how to balance that with, their in-person interaction and how they carry out their lives and things like that. So I think it's definitely a skill. Like, it's a new skill that we need to have and to equip. And especially because you work in the education field, I'm sure this is something that is talked about a lot. Like, how do we teach kids to, get the most out of their online presence and online interactions. So it's more positive than negative. And when there are negative things that happen, they can manage them.
No, that's the important aspect of it, and it actually starts in the homes because a lot of children, their first exposure to technology is really with their parents, with their families, and so helping their parents to better understand, what should they have as far as discussions, interactions, help with their children to better understand it. And I think the better the parents understand it, the better their children will. And, the other aspect is, they're watching their parents. We sometimes forget that, children are, very attentive to the people around them. And so they are watching how we use the technology. And that also reflects how they will see how best to use it. And, we've seen that, in psychological research for, tens of decades. I mean, going way, way back, children tend to grow up as their parents, and that's their first role models. So that's the people that we have to work with. But then we have to take that to the next level and get that into our schools, and then say, okay, parents, thank you for the foundations that you've provided, but now we're going to help them to expand that. And that's really what education is about. It's expanding people's minds, children's minds, so that they can be prepared to move and be that next generation. And, I think sometimes we lose focus on, what education is. Sometimes I think it's just, we, teach them how to sit in their desks and, how to, be nice to one another in the classroom. But we can do so much more and begin to show them that what we do in real life and what we do online, they're mirror, they're balance of each other. And how do we begin to build on those so that they can take those forward and hopefully even be better at using these tools than we were, and be able to, show and expand upon, what they could do in the classroom, but how they could interact with groups of people. I remember seeing, a study, and this has been probably 25 years ago, that was talking about that the future of work was really going to be individuals moving in and out of teams all over the globe with their certain skill sets and being able to share their best attributes in each of those teams. But then once that task was finished, that team would be dissolved, not for negative reasons, but the task was completed. And then they would move on to new teams, and they would then interact and work on a new question, a new issue. And then, but it was about them bringing the skills that were their best attributes.
That is such an interesting concept. And I feel like it's all happening thanks to our online presence, right? And thanks to our digital citizenship. This wouldn't have happened, say, 50 years ago, or hell, even 20 years ago. We never thought about these things. And to a certain extent, COVID wasn't the best thing ever, but it kind of helped us to be flexible and make the most of our online presence. And we see that teams do thrive, even in that context. So, imagine what else we could do with it if we look at it in the right way. Now, one of the biggest thing that people talk about, and the elephant in the room when it comes to our online presence, is social media. And I want to draw our attention here because I think this is something that I could definitely learn from as well. Like I've been sort of like I have this like up and down relationship with social media, and I'm sure other people too. It can really foster, positive online interaction, but it can also very quickly damage your mental health if you don't, sort of like keep yourself in check and have a system for yourself. Now, I can share my experience, and then I'm keen to hear from your expert opinion. I think it was interesting for me in the early days to have access to social media because I was like, oh my God, all my friends are there. But then very quickly, I also realized that, maybe they're acquaintances amongst friends. Not all of them are my friends. And sometimes when I talk to my friends, we kind of go like joke around it. And sometimes you would be talking to your friends and you have your phone there. And then, like if there's a dead silence, people just kind of like reach for their phone and start looking at social media. I remember this instance really vividly because it was hilarious. I remember my friends and I, we were hanging out, was just, at home, sort of like chilling together. And it was kind of like, I think it was a trip. So we spent a lot of time together. There was a dead silence. I think I was checking my phone and she was like, are you talking to your followers? And I was like, that's hilarious. Like now instead of saying, are you talking to your friends? We were saying, are you talking to your followers? And I laughed and I said, no, I was actually doing something else. But I find that to be such a good question because most of the time, yes, we're talking to people we barely know. And it's kind of like you're putting on a show on social media sometimes. And I find that to be something to navigate. Like on the one hand, a lot of scrolling happens on social media when you don't have anything else to do or you kind of like get sucked into it for some reason. And especially when people are at their lowest in their mental health, they tend to resort to the scrolling part of it. But I think to me, like it's been a really great journey to find inspiration on social media because I get to know a lot of people that I would never have heard about, pre-social media, thanks to all these hashtags and like finding content. So again, it's up to you to find content, and your feed is curated up to you, right? So for example, my feed is full of cats, and like leadership contents, professional development, career, relationships content. So it's kind of like I learn about these topics a lot. Happiness and well-being sort of pop up as well. And the more we find these things, the algorithms would point us to more of these things. And sometimes it's really great, it's soothing. But other times, I find that when I was younger, it was like easily just full of news that wouldn't be relevant to me, like celebrity news or, like what to buy. Because, there's a certain thing that happens there where they know how to capture your attention and they try to sell you more things. So I found that it's really good to curate hobbies outside of social media. Obviously, that's super important. Actually spending time with friends, having your own hobbies, doing things intentionally. And in fact, I learned this from my friend the other day. She said, why don't you download OneSec? It's an app, it's free, and embed it into your Instagram or, Facebook or whichever app that you tend to frequent that you kind of want to lower your, time usage there. And what it does is it creates a lack of time because normally you click on the app, it opens immediately. But with OneSec, you will have some sort of intervention. You either do a breathing exercise, you have to like do something before you can actually go to the app. And then intentionally you ask yourself, oh, why am I here? And I found that to be super helpful. So when I'm actually on Instagram, I'm there for a reason. I'm either posting or responding to messages or truly catching up with what I missed rather than just scrolling for no reason. So to me, it's like an interesting dynamic and I'm still, navigating it. And I found it to be something that we can benefit from for sure. So what are some of the examples that you think you can share with our audience when it comes to fostering these positive interactions on social media and use it in a way that can actually enhance our mood and enhance our well-being and happiness?
Now you hit on quite a bit of it. I mean, the intentionality is one of the big pieces of it. Being intentional about how you're using social media. Why are you using it? One of the interesting aspects is the age of that children that are beginning to go on to social media, and here in the United States, we have a 13-year-old level that you're, for most sites that you're supposed to be. The European Union has been trying to expand that, move it more towards 16 or even later, so that it gives, children especially an opportunity to grow themselves and maybe gain some more skills, especially around social media, before they're brought into it. But, we all know that it's very easy to just backdate a birthday to be able to say I'm 13 or 16 or whatever it is. But the interesting thing that we found was that it had a sort of a trickle down effect, that especially when we were talking about Facebook, I believe, and at one point, Facebook, you could use the login from Facebook to be able to get into Tinder. So you could actually identify yourself as being an older person on Facebook, and then it also shared that through into Tinder and any other site that connected. And so now, younger children were able to make connections on sites that really weren't designated for them. They really weren't made for that age group. And so, it was one of those things of, why are you there? What are you doing? How, but I love that aspect of, being able to take a moment. We use a piece called STEP, and it's stop, think, empathize, and then post. But the stop piece, especially when you're in social media, is that big piece. Too often it's just this, I'm, it got quiet. I'm standing in line. I'm, something that, that it breaks, that there's a time where I feel uncomfortable, and my phone becomes that sort of comforting aspect. And people will talk about, that, and especially, 5-7 years ago, people's relationship with their phones, with their social media was very, very personal. And they felt, if I lost my phone, my world would come apart, you couldn't, some teachers were, I'm going to take your phone away from you. Oh, you can't do that. No one can get a hold of me. My parents can't get a hold of me. Nobody can, and it was a very unsettling piece for a lot of people, that they felt so connected to that device that they were concerned that if they didn't have it or have the ability to go online to those, that it was going to be damaging, because they weren't going to know what was going on, that fear of missing out piece, that FOMO kind of mentality of, that here's, things that are going on around me that I'm not a part of, that I want to make sure that I'm part of that. And that's something that we also have to learn to control is how do we, be content with where we're at that moment, and being with a person or being with a group, or, and I've seen, there's all kinds of games and things that people have tried, the stacking game, when you go out to dinner and the first person that grabs their cell phone has to pay for dinner for everybody, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And those have come and gone, at different times, but it's just interesting that, we have to find a way to separate ourselves sometimes from social media. I think even with all the benefits, there's definitely time for balance. There's times that you need to be able to step away. You need to be able to have that opportunity to connect on a personal level, and I think that's so important. And I think that's what a lot of people miss during, especially during the COVID years, of they didn't have that connection with people.
Yeah, definitely. I think it all comes back to education, which is the key piece of everything, really. We probably don't have the knowledge, we don't have the tools. Some people, as I said earlier, I think it's a very interesting space. You can just jump straight in. There's no guideline. You can do whatever you want with it. And so, on the one hand, like you said, it can boost our happiness and well-being immensely if we know where to look, and we curate our relationships and our interaction in a way that would foster these connections, or like the insights that we can learn. Because I know that a lot of people, they are amazing at looking at sources that would bring them inspiration, do the learning in the right places, and they don't really get sucked into social media per se. So when it comes to social media, it's kind of like it's a double-edged sword, as we all know. So we need to learn, and we need to have the tools, and that's why, before we go to the next section, I would love to ask you this final question that is around resources and tools, because this is education. We can all start to educate ourselves, and equip ourselves with the right resources and tools so that we can utilize our understanding of this digital citizenship that we all have, so we can actually cultivate more positive online presence and interactions for ourselves. So what would be some of those resources and tools that you would recommend?
The amazing thing is that there's so many that are out there today. I mean, if you went back 20 years ago when I first started in this, there was hardly anything, of course, being definitely not discussed about digital citizenship, but it was more like online etiquette. Was really more the discussion piece, and how to be a good person with each other, and how to be nice, I guess, if you will, online. And so, that was kind of the starting point. But I will tell you, Australia has been one of those areas that jumped on this early on. A couple of resources, the e-safety committee there in Australia, and also several of the school districts. I was just checking some of their sites, have a lot of information on digital citizenship. So there's a lot of resources that if you go to your either your school or, like I said, e-safety, they have a lot of connections to those pieces. As far as the United States, there is definitely Common Sense is a big group, and they are expanding internationally. They now have a group that's in the UK, so they are expanding outside of the United States and trying to build that connection. But they have a lot of resources, probably some of the best videos that I've ever seen of classroom interactions on digital citizenship, but also a lot of parenting tips and ideas for their, just to share and understand the topics better. And there's videos, there's white papers, they even do on their other side, so there's Common Sense, and then there's Common Sense Media. They even do things like rating the video games to help parents, but also like movies and those kinds of things as well. So very full featured. And in the UK and that area, the Council of Europe that is very much growing in the whole digital citizenship piece. And I've had opportunities to have some calls with them and some others. But as I mentioned, a little while ago, I've had contact, and mostly it's graduate students in a lot of these different areas that are trying to expand the ideas. Some of it is, basing off of what I had done, but also, of course, building on other people's ideas. And they were just contacting me to better understand some of these ideas. But it's very much a global discussion, not just a United States or Australia. I'll say Canada is another one that they are very much involved with this. So, if you were, to put in information about, digital citizenship or e-safety or, I was even looking up some of these the topics, just about happiness in social media and, all that. I'm surprised how much, resources there are available just that are out there. Now, granted, some of them are better than others, and you have to be diligent in deciding what kinds of information that you want to use, because it's you don't want to make it worse by going to sites that are going to give you poor information. So you do have to do a little bit of due diligence. You have to do a little bit of work, but there's so many different aspects that are out there, and I tell people that if it doesn't work for you, don't keep using it. Find something else. There's so many resources that are out there that don't just keep after something if it's not working for you. Even if a friend or a mate or somebody said, "Hey, I use this." If it doesn't work for you, you need to find your own happiness. You can't identify that what I find is making me happy is going to make you happy as well. So it's really about being able to discern, spend some time. I know we're in this kind of a hurry up type society that we always want things to get done, but if you're talking about your own well-being, your how you want to be and how you want to be with others, you've got to be very, very careful. You've got to check and find out what's going to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so true because, as we said earlier, happiness is very personal. Each person has their own definition. So each person would have their own way of finding their happiness. And online interactions are so diverse. You can do so many things on the internet. So it's up to you to curate that. And even the resources and the tools, they can be recommended by anyone. But at the same time, you have to test them and see if they work for you specifically. You don't have to use something just because somebody else is doing that. So I appreciate it. Thank you for that. It's really a really important message that should get out there. Now, let's talk about something more practical. We've covered a lot of the theory, and I'm sure there's so much more to talk about. This is such a big topic, and we can dissect it even further. But in the interest of time, let's talk about something more practical that our audience can take away from today. What is a practice that you personally employ that you find to be very helpful when it comes to boosting your mood through positive online interactions?
It's finding that space and finding those individuals that are the best match for who I am. I hear from people all over, and it's really finding those connections and making connections. And some I've had opportunities to meet people from all over. Some connections are, great. They're wonderful. And some of them, we tried to connect and just couldn't find the space. And I think it's really about identifying, what's important. And, you're really, what, we were building upon this idea of safe, savvy, and social is that, learning those skills at each of those levels to be better and be more appropriate, more responsible. But it all ends up being, how we feel. Are we happy? Are we satisfied with what we're doing? And I think that's something that I think that we sometimes get into things and we get onto sites and we feel that it's not fulfilling, that we're kind of going through the motions. And you talked about swiping and kind of just going through that. I think we have to step back at times and really identify what is the intention? Why are we doing this? And if it's not fulfilling us, you need to back up. And maybe, some experts would say, oh, just delete that app, or take that away or whatever. I think you have to decide, what's my priority? What's going to get me what I want? And that's, I think that, again, back to the original question about happiness, we need to identify what we're hoping to get out of all of this, out of our interactions, our society, our place. And it really has to be understanding all of those aspects. And that's why I think that digital citizenship for me always sits at the center of that, because all of these different pieces are all offshoots of how we interact and how we do things. And we have to, you mentioned that, education's the key. But we also have to help our parents. We have to help our communities. We have to help, our teachers to better understand this. And I think that, if we look at the future, and, there's a lot of crises that are going on, everywhere. And the mental health crisis right now across the globe is one of those aspects. And of course, everyone wants to lay it at the feet of social media and, all of these different pieces. I think it's about people, and you have to identify that, if this isn't making you happy, if this isn't doing what you expect it to do, then you need to stop, and you need to evaluate, and you need to identify, what do I want to do next? Because if I keep doing the same thing, it's just going to become harder. Yeah. And that's where we have to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so true, because a lot of the time we kind of just go with the flow, and we don't really reevaluate the relationship we have with our phone or, our devices in general. And like you said, this is truly about taking a moment to really evaluate that. And I think we should do this as often as possible, because even at the very moment you pick up, you open your laptop, you go to a site, or you pick up your phone to do something, we can ask ourselves that question the very second. How is this serving me? And I find that we don't do enough of that. So, the more we do this, the more we're going to be aware of how we are interacting with one another, or, just sort of interact with the sites out there and how we feel when we do that. And it's a matter of spreading the word too, because like you said, it's not just about us, it's about our community and people around us. And I think that's a beautiful message to close with, because we're not here alone. We feel like we are alone with our phone, even when we're by ourselves. But actually, no, any interaction that we make could make a positive impact or a negative impact. So it's up to us to decide. And when we realize that it's more than just us, it's going to be more impactful, because it's not like, oh yeah, I'm just scrolling for fun. Not really. You're wasting time when you can actually perhaps benefit from an actual phone call with a friend, for example. Maybe you would enjoy that better. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. So before we close the show, we always have open mic for our guests to share things that they are passionate about. I know you're very on brand, because you always talk about your professional expertise areas. So I wouldn't be surprised if you mentioned something in this space. So Mike, here's your open mic. Take it away.
It's just great to have this opportunity, and there's so many connections to all of these different pieces, and I think we have to see where they're going, and that's kind of where we're headed. I'm currently working on a book chapter with another colleague. We're really looking at all of the different aspects of digital citizenship, but really about especially artificial intelligence and where all of this is going, because that's a big piece right at the moment of, what's that relationship? And, especially when we talk about, going online and having those connections, are we having connections with people, or are we actually having connections with an artificial intelligence? So it's an interesting piece to go down and take a look at. But we are expanding. We are looking at another book chapter, or perhaps even another book, to talk about the aspects of the international community and digital citizenship. Because as I said, most of my connections here of late have been with folks like yourself outside of my normal sphere, the United States, but really about the international aspects of what digital citizenship looks like. Because I think, that's a part that's hard for some people, because we're all in different countries. We're different. But as we mentioned early on, but we're all digital citizens when we pick up a device, and we're all in this together. And we have to understand and what's the next generation going to say or do with this technology? Are they going to do better? Are they going to have more issues, more concerns? So it's a definitely an interesting question, and we're hoping to pull something out. If somebody is interested, especially in the international community, you can go to my website, digitalcitizenship.net. You can go there and you can contact me directly, and we would love to have a conversation and see how we might be able to connect and be able to share this stuff on the international scale. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks so much, Mike, for being here. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Sero Boost, the Happiness Science Insights podcast produced by the Happiness Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website, ha.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Lu Ngo. Thanks for tuning in.